Welcome to Misconnections. We're both Elizabeth. I'm Elizabeth Villa, aka Lizzie.
And I'm Elizabeth Wyndham, aka Beth.
Misconnections is a podcast that explores our longing to connect and the circumstances that stand in our way.
Each episode will bring a true story of a missed connection and an expert guest to help us unpack it so that we can all get better at making real, meaningful connections that feel good to us.
That's why we started this show. After a series of our own misconnections in dating, friendships, and family relationships, we decided to get some help.
Good news. You have stumbled upon a new type of episode where we are bringing more voices, more perspectives, and expanding the conversation we get to have around connection.
That's right. For this mini episode, we invited the storyteller you heard from last week to reflect on his experience telling his story and how he's feeling about situationships today.
Okay, here's how this worked. We sent a list of questions to our storyteller, and he sent us voice memos filled with his answers.
If you're hoping to hear more singing from a storyteller, I'm sorry to say that is not about to happen, but he shares some lovely answers that I'm sure you will enjoy. So here we go.
So, how did you feel listening to your story?
I smiled ear to ear listening to my story. I am feeling grateful for that experience and grateful to see that over time I have developed a more solid sense of self. I've moved on from the tears. I can laugh whenever I hear Dionne Warwick's "I Know I'll Never Love This Way Again," but I take it slow with the Scorpios.
Did you think about the relationship you had and shared in your story as a situationship? What did you think about what Myisha had to share about situationships and relationships that live in a gray area?
Myisha gave me a lot to think about. Most of what has swirled around my brain has been regarding the linear path, aka the relationship escalator. Historically, I have gravitated towards the expected take that situationships are bad and that I ought to avoid them. Don't let a person waste your time. But her thoughts helped me to see the value of situationships and that they can work until they don't. In this situationship, I had specific expectations as to its trajectory. I was attached to my expectations, and then I flung those expectations onto an individual. And I think I did that largely because I was scared of the gray area. Even now, it's easy to default to a culture of urgency, like a scarcity mindset, which usually prompts me to speed things up. I want to give myself even more permission to slow things down. The gray area doesn't feel as scary as it did in the past. Walking away from this particular story, yes, it felt like a loss. But now I don't see it as a loss or as a waste of time. I actually wonder what might have taken place if I slowed down or expanded my capacity for romantic or sexual partnerships that don't adhere to the steps prescribed by society. There's something enormously liberating and validating to consider romantic or sexual partnerships that don't adhere to the steps prescribed by society. After all the smoke is settled, my experience deepened my ability to connect with the people I meet, especially the ones I'm attracted to.
In your story, you took a big step to ask, "What is this?" after you started to notice you might not be on the same page about your relationship and where it was headed. What's your approach to communication in relationships now? How has this experience influenced that approach?
I really enjoy the joie de vivre, as it was put, in meeting new people or dating someone. I've enjoyed taking my time in this process, and that has allowed me to think about how I am communicating and what I am communicating. The relationship escalator has one speed and one direction, so getting my mind off of this linear path feels like growth. And it points me in a direction that allows me to show up authentically and not simply as a character playing a role. In my story, I asked, "What is this?" only after I was 10 stories up on the relationship escalator. Attraction is human nature, but I have worked to engage temperature checks for myself and others to ensure that we're on the same page as we evolve. Before hearing Myisha's thoughts, I would not have considered any of the situationships between this story and now as having been positive, mainly because they felt like duds or they weren't moving fast enough. Reflecting on this experience has allowed me to reframe the other experiences as positive encounters that have only served to deepen my capacity to relate to others.
You mentioned that you learned the type of attachment you desire from this misconnection, one where people, including yourself, take responsibility for their actions. How do you think about that now, and how have you been able to experience it?
Since this missed connection, I have encountered opportunities to practice communicating differently in all of my relationships. Asking for clarity and making, quote, I statements has been most helpful, and releasing myself of the pressure to be automatically in sync with the needs and desires of someone I am attracted to has been a healthy way to hold on to me in the process.
Thank you so much to the storyteller for sharing even more with us. We think it's so important to continue to hear from all of our storytellers and from you.
Yes! What questions do you have about connection? What stories do you have to share? Email us at elizabeths@misconnectionspod.com or send us a message on Instagram or TikTok at misconnectionspodcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
Yes, and get ready for next week's story.
It's gonna be good.
This is Misconnections. Thanks for listening. I'm Elizabeth Wyndham.
And I'm Elizabeth Villa. Special thanks to our truly amazing storyteller. You know who you are.
Misconnections is co-hosted, produced, and edited by us, the Elizabeths, Elizabeth Villa and Elizabeth Wyndham.
Our theme music is Feeling by Daniel Musto.
Have a misconnection story to share with us? Email us at elizabeths@misconnectionspod.com.
And please follow, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.